What's up, guys? Shawnthebro here, and today we're going to be going over items part 1 in the Super Smash Brothers tutorial series. So, items are very, very prevalent within the Super Smash Brothers games and platform fighters in general. So, what we are going to be doing today is creating the item class and being able to interact with it. In this case, all I'm going to do when interacting with it is destroy the item. That's literally the goal, because I was thinking of these as like health items. I can heal my damage or something like that. However, I'm not really going to be getting into the implementation of specific items today. Really what I want to cover today in part 1 is creating items, using parent and child classes, being able to spawn them in the world, and then being able to interact with them by using your light attack or using your A button or whatever it may be in your game. But basically being able to interact with items by pressing a button. We will also have an episode on actually spawning items randomly throughout the game, throughout the match, and in random spots, random types, and different things like that. And then we will have implementation for a ton of different weapons. I'll probably have a general implementation episode where I go over one health item, a weapon or an ability or something like that. But we may very well need to have episodes dedicated to specific items or weapons. So for now, we're just going to go over creating the class. This alone will get you started, and you can come up with ideas on your own for what kind of weapons or items you'd like in your game. So the first thing I did was I added a C++ class. So with that, if you're not familiar with how our project is set up and everything we've done so far, you may want to click on these iCards in the top right corner. Check out the playlist to the entire Platform Fighter series so you can see everything we've done to this point. And then I'll also leave this data table link right here in case you want to check that out. It could be useful for how you set up your items. We're not going to use it today, but you very well could. Now, first things first, like I said, we're going to add a new C++ class. When you try and add new from here, you might not see anything that says C++ class. So it could be a little bit weird at first. But you can click on either this button here that pulls out your little content in C++ classes folder, or filter and filter based off of C++ assets. I usually pull this out, click on C++ classes, click add an import, and new C++ class. At this point, I just click show all classes and I pick the item I want. I just want the item to be a child of an actor. All I really need for it, as far as the functionality goes from Unreal, is to be able to spawn it in the world, and we can define the rest of the logic. It just needs to be able to spawn and have actor related functions. So pick actor, click next, and name it whatever you want. I called mine base item. Then you hit create class. I've already done this, so I'm not going to click that button. After a while, Visual Studio should open up. If it doesn't, you can find it in your solution. It should go to the source folder here. And you see I have base item.h and base item CPP. So yours will look pretty similar to this. I will have quite a bit extra because I've added it, but you'll have tick, the constructor, begin play. I've added an enum. I've added this function right here, use item, and I've added this variable of the enum type. And I'll show you the CPP file in a second. So what we're doing here, this is the header file for the base item. So basically we need to set up anything that all of our items are going to have, or at least all of our items can have. So the main thing that I want to set up today is the e-item type. We want to know what type each item is. So we have many different items in our game. You could have literally, you could have 20, you could have 5, you could have 500. It's up to you and how much time you have. So I want to define every single item to have a type and to at least know what it is. And it doesn't have to be, it can be as specific or as general as you want. You could have health, and you could have 30 healing pickups that are all the health type, just so that it heals. You could also separate them all individually, which is probably what I'm going to do. So I have none, which is basically just a default value for the item. In case we don't set it, it doesn't default to anything. Then I have a standard health pickup, and then I have something called a mystery box. Mystery box, I don't have any logic for either of these right now, But really, the health pickup is supposed to heal your damage, and the mystery box is going to turn into a random item when you use it. That's what my thoughts are, but you can make these whatever you'd like. Okay. So that's pretty simple. Just make this enum class, fill out this data. We've made enums before in this series and my other series. So you can probably just grab these and use that same sort of functionality. Call it whatever you want. I called mine item type. Then from here, what I've done is I've made a variable of this enum type. This is great that this exists, but we need a way to track what this specific item is. So I went down here and I made an item type variable. I called it type, and I made sure that it was edit anywhere in Blueprint read write so we could access it in Blueprint. I've also written another function here, specifically a Blueprint implementable event, which means that we don't define the logic in C++, we define it in the blueprints, but we can call it from wherever we want. So we can call it in code. I've also made it blueprint callable, so we can call it in the blueprint. I called this use item, and as the comment says, use the item, pick it up, consume, activate, etc. So basically, whatever this item does, this is what we want to do when we interact with it. You know, we want to trigger that logic. So if you just pick it up and bring it around with you, sure. If it's an instant use, sure. If it activates an ability or state, sure. Again, you can do whatever you like with it. I do make it a blueprint implementable event because I want each individual item to have its own logic, and they're all going to be blueprint actors, blueprint objects that we can use. So filling it out in there makes the most sense. All right, let's go to the base item CPP. And this is going to be exactly what you expect. It's going to be everything that's in here from the default. I haven't actually changed anything with it. I've cleaned it up a bit because I, quite frankly, don't like a lot of the way the comments look and the spacing looks, but I haven't actually added anything of note or anything that's actually important. You can go ahead and set your default values, which in this case would just be type. You'd set it to none. However, technically enums do default to their first value, so by default it is going to none anyway, and it's not really necessary. All right. Once you've made your code class, that's your parent class. That has everything that we're going to need for every item. Every item will need that data. But I also want to do a base item BP class, just like we did with our characters, because we can set up our components that we want in the base item BP, and then when we make children of it, they already have this stuff. We just have to set up, you know, the individual logic, the logic for that specific item. So to do this, I've added and imported a blueprint class, and I choose my new C++ class as my parent. So base item right here, and I select it. When you select it, it will create a blueprint, and then I've renamed it to be base item BP. When I click into it, I come into here. You won't have this begin overlap. We'll add this in a second. But, you know, you'll have whatever. You'll have an empty graph, or you'll be on the viewport here. What we need to do, this is just the blueprint wrapper class, so we don't need to set up anything specific. We don't need to add a mesh for this or anything like that, but I want to make sure my defaults are set up correctly and my collision and things like that are also set up correctly. So first things first, if you click on class defaults in base item BP, make sure the type is set to be none. This is the wrapper class. Like I said, it should not have a type by default. We don't want default items to be a certain type. If we did, that means, say, you default items to be the baseball bat, and you pick up, you know, the Pokeball. Well, when you do that, it's going to say, oh yeah, I need to be the baseball bat, and that just doesn't make sense. They're completely different items. So I set the base class to be none, and then we just override it in the child classes with the data that we need. When you make this, you'll have this base item BP self up top, and then you'll have default scene root. You can override this by just dragging a component over top of it, literally. I normally don't, just because it does act as like almost a little parent element in a folder that you can organize things for, but it doesn't hurt anything to replace it. I also don't think it really hurts anything to leave it there, which is why I normally leave it there, but you can always change it later. But anyway, I click on the default scene root, and then I add component, and we want a static mesh. This static mesh component is what the object is going to actually look like. So if it's a baseball bat, then we're going to have a baseball bat as the mesh here. You can also use a skeletal mesh if you do want something that's moving, or something that has animations by default. However, I didn't feel it was necessary, at least for now. I've also gone ahead and added a box collision component. I've called it Pickup Collider. You can rename it by right-clicking and renaming, or clicking on it, going to details, and changing the variable name. So I call it Pickup Collider because this is the range in which the weapon or item can be interacted with. Alright, so let's look at it now with all of our settings. So if you click on your static mesh, you can name it something if you'd like. You can give it a default if you'd like. But make sure the collision settings look like this. Generate overlap events, yes. Collision presets overlap all. We don't necessarily have to do this on the mesh, but we do need to make sure that the object is not blocking. We don't want to block the character or any sort of movement because the item is in front of them. We want to be able to walk through it, pick it up, all sorts of different stuff. So make sure it's on overlap all. I also go ahead and make sure that the box collider has generate overlap events on, and I leave it as it is. By default, box collision has overlap all dynamic. That's perfectly fine. So at this point, we can actually, have these variables on these components, and thus you can change them to make it look however you want. But we don't want to do that on the base item BP. We want to do that for each individual child class. So now what I've done is I go to my blueprints, specifically where I made base item BP. I can right click on it and create a child blueprint class. Then you call it whatever your next item is going to be. So I made it based off, I made one for each enum value that I have. So I had none, which is the base, and then I have health pickup and mystery box. So if I go into Unreal, I've made a health pickup BP and a mystery box BP. For this, it's pretty simple. All we're really going to do is look at the event use item and perform the logic that we actually want to for that object. Now, like I said, we don't have the logic set up in today's episode. You could jump ahead and do this, or you could go ahead and wait until we come out with the episode to perform logic for specific items, weapons, whatever. But I want to set up the function, the use item, so that we can call it on these actors, and when we end up changing the logic to work as we would like, then it works without, any hitches, nothing hidden. We know exactly what we're working with. So, you can see base item BP in the event graph. I do have a begin after overlap. I will explain that in 1 second. Let's go over the use item first. So in all the child classes, every single child class of the base item BP class, you can go ahead and type event use item, and this is what you want. When you click it, it will create this node. And then everything after this is what happens when we call use item. Well, we're going to call use item when we press the interact button, which in my case is going to be the same button as the light attack button. And then it's going to call use item on this actor. So this is the health pickup BP. So I'm going to, heal my player. Again, right now I'm just destroying it because we haven't gotten to that episode yet. But feel free to go ahead and put in your own logic for your items. Make sure that everything is set up correctly in your components. The static mesh, now that this is a child, the health pickup, you can put a mesh, you can put a material. I didn't change the collision or anything else. But make sure everything's a good size. This is my mesh. That little square that you see with the red line is my box collider, which goes a little bit outside of the mesh. So if I'm anywhere within this range of it, I will be able to interact with this object, this item. Okay, and then if you look at class defaults on the object, the item as a whole, I set the item type to be health pickup. And there you go. Now, remember what I said. For all children, you have to have the event use item if you want to be able to trigger special logic for it. So in the mystery box BP, I do the same thing because yet again, we don't have the logic for it yet. However, we will be doing our own logic here for whatever this item should do. And so in class defaults of the mystery box, I set the type to be mystery box. I set the mesh and the materials correctly. And then the pickup collider, I make sure it's the right size. You can see it's slightly bigger than the object that I am picking up. Okay, and now at this point, we have the ability to use items, but we don't know exactly which item we're trying to use. And the way we can figure this out is by knowing which items we are overlapping with, and then calling that, use item function on that specific item. So to do that, we need to update our code a little bit. If we go back to this guy and go to our character, SSB template character.h. What I actually want to do is know what items we are overlapping. In this case, I'm actually only going to be able to overlap one item at a time. As you begin overlap with them, this variable is going to be set so that we know what item is overlapped. Then, if the player interacts with it, using the light attack key in my case, or whatever button may be the interact key or button, then they can actually, obtain the weapon or item and use it. So all I've done is made a variable called a base item pointer. That's what the asterisk is for. Overlapped item. Blueprint, read, write, and all that good stuff. Now, if you're not able to do this, it's because you need to make sure you include your base item.h class up at the top. Otherwise, you won't be able to see this class type of base item. So now with that in here, we have overlapped item, and we can set it when we begin overlapping and remove it when we stop overlapping. And that way we'll know exactly what items we're overlapping with, what we can equip, and what we are going to be using. So if we go to our code yet again, but this time an SSB template character, since I have this logic set up to be, you pick things up with the same button that you use your basic attack with or your light attack with, then all I do is in the basic attack function, if the overlapped item is null pointer, we will be setting it to null pointer once we end overlap with something, or if we've never overlapped with something to begin with. And so basically it's saying if there is no item that's overlapping, then we don't want to do this. We just want to keep doing the regular attack logic. Otherwise, we want to call use item of that item. So I think that makes sense. Also worth noting, in the constructor, so up at the top, I go ahead and set overlapped item to be null pointer by default, just so there's no confusion and no mistakes. At the start, when the character is spawned, there are no items that they're overlapping by default. Anyway, you realize in here, in the basic attack function, I'm calling use item, so that's where it triggers the use item event in these child classes. So this gets called, and then it does this logic. All right, and then the last thing we need to do is if we go into base item BP, I showed you a snapshot of this before, but in our event graph, we want two events. We want the actor begin overlap and actor end overlap. Now these are both default events that you can get in Unreal when something is a child of the actor class. So all you do is type in event actor begin overlap and event actor end overlap. Get both of these, and these will pop up, and they come with an other actor variable. So what we want to do is drag off the other actor and type cast to and our character. My base character is called SSB template character. So you can see I casted that for both the begin and end overlap, just to make sure that this item is beginning to overlap with the character or a character that we suspect, and the item is ending overlap with a character that we suspect. Then all we're going to do is set the overlapped item, the variable we made, the pointer, to this value. So if we're beginning overlap, This item, or in base item BP, is the one that is the overlapped item. So we want to go ahead and make sure that that is set up. So you can drag off your SSB template character where we made the overlapped item variable and type set overlapped item. If I could type. Okay, just like I've done above. And then all I do is drag off of this guy and type self, get a reference to self, and then drag it in. Now with the end overlap, it's very similar. What we want to do is we want to check the actor, like I said, with the cast. And once we know that this actor is no longer overlapping with this item, then the overlapped item also must be reset. And so in this case, I just set overlapped item like that and just leave it completely empty, meaning it's completely meaningless. It sets it to no pointer or nothing, which can be used later on. At this point, our job is very simple. Build your code if you need to, relaunch Unreal, and then you're going to go into your levels, whatever level you want to have the items on, and just drag them into the scene. You can literally drag the blueprints in. Just like this. Make sure they line up on the correct x-axis value. So I have 1200 as my default value for where everything is at, since we are in a 2.5D environment. And there you go. Now it's in the level. You can see why we need to randomly be able to spawn it, but for now this is perfectly fine. It shows off everything that we actually need. Now if I play my level one more time, I can come in here, load up this level, and I can interact with each of these items when I press my light attack. We should probably avoid doing the attack when you interact with the item, but since we don't have all of the item interactions set up yet, it's perfectly fine to leave it like that for now. Alright guys, and at that point, that's all we need for base item and the item logic part 1. There's plenty more we can do with items, but this is the basic logic you need to set up an item system where you can create new items pretty easily and quickly and set their logic to be different for each class. So hopefully this helped you, and if it did, then please subscribe. There's more from me in the channel than anything else you can do, and I really appreciate it. Speaking of, I want to give a huge shout out to all my YouTube membership and Patreon supporters and subscribers. Thank you guys so much for all the love and support. I really appreciate it. If you guys had any issues with this tutorial or any of them, please feel free to reach out to me on Discord. There's a link in the description. I'd be happy to help you out for free. Anyway, that's all I got for you guys. So thank you so much for watching. I'm Shawnthebro, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye, guys.